An aircraft with 81 passengers is cruising England over 17,000 feet of altitude when bang! In one violent instant, the windscreen in front of the captain explodes outward into the sky. The captain is sucked out through that window. His body slams against the exterior of the fuselage. He's hanging outside the aircraft, more than half of his body pinned to the roof of the plane by 350-mile-per-hour winds. Inside the cockpit, his legs are jammed against the flight controls, pushing the aircraft into a steep dive. The cockpit erupts into chaos, a deafening roar of wind, freezing temperatures plummeting to minus 17 degrees Celsius, and a violent tornado of air sucking everything out of the aircraft. The co-pilot is alone, battling hurricane-force winds in the cockpit, trying to regain control. If he leaves the control to try to save the captain, the plane can crash. If he keeps trying to regain control, the captain can die. This looks like a horror movie, but it's a real story. This is exactly what happened with British Airways Flight 5390.
I am Captain Jack Mercer. What you're going to watch now is the story from the perspective of a pilot who has lived and seen a lot in 25 years of experience. Welcome aboard.
Okay, this bizarre story happened on June 10th, 1990. We're at Birmingham Airport, England. It's 7:20 a.m. local time, a beautiful summer morning, clear blue skies and light winds, perfect flying weather, the kind of day that makes you glad to be a pilot, you know? The British Airways Flight 5390 is preparing for a routine hop from Birmingham to Malaga, Spain. Just under 3 hours of flight time, nothing complicated. This is what we call a milk run in the industry, a flight you could do with your eyes closed, you know? Let's talk about the aircraft. It's a BAC-111. Yes, probably you've never heard about it, but remember, we're in 1990, my friend. The BAC-111 was known as the Jeep of the skies, a real workhorse. Twin-engine, narrow-body jet, very reliable and easy to maintain, plus a good safety record, you know? Today, she's carrying 81 passengers and 6 crew members this morning, mostly British holidaymakers heading to the Spanish coast. Families, retirees, people looking forward to sunshine, sangria, and relaxation. They're settling into their seats, barely paying attention to the safety briefing, because come on, who really watches those anymore, right? Now, let me introduce you to the crew members. Captain Timothy Lancaster, 42 years old, sits in the left seat. He's been flying commercially for 21 years, 11,000 flight hours under his belt. Experienced, confident, and well-liked by his colleagues, I found out. Captain Tim is a professional through and through. He knows this route well because he's done it dozens of times. In the right seat is First Officer Alastair Atchison, 39 years old. Younger guy, 7,500 hours of experience. Alastair has never flown with Captain Lancaster before. They don't know each other's flying styles yet, but it shouldn't be a problem, right? The cabin crew consists of 4 flight attendants: Chief Steward John Heward, Steward Nigel Ogden, Steward Simon Rogers, and Stewardess Sue Prince. These aren't rookies, my friend. They've worked together for years. They know each other well, going out for beers after work, that kind of camaraderie. They take pride in their work. Everyone's in good spirits this morning. It's going to be an easy flight, or so they think. The weather? Perfect. Visibility unlimited. No storms, no turbulence expected. Temperature at cruise altitude will be cold, about minus 17 degrees Celsius, but that's normal at 23,000 feet. It's 7:25 a.m. and the pushback starts. Captain Lancaster and First Officer Atchison run through their checklists. Everything is by the book. Engines spool up normally, all systems showing green. No warnings, no anomalies. Birmingham Tower, Speedbird 5390 ready for pushback and start, Atchison calls out. Speedbird 5390 cleared to push and start. Have a good flight. So, it's 7:32 a.m. and Flight 5390 is cleared for takeoff. Captain Lancaster advances the throttles. The Rolls-Royce Spey engines roar to life. The aircraft accelerates down the runway. 80 knots, First Officer Atchison calls out. Check, Captain Lancaster responds. V1. The aircraft passes the point of no return. They're committed to the takeoff now. Rotate. Lancaster pulls back gently on the yoke, the nose lifts, main gear leaves the pavement. And just like that, Flight 5390 is airborne. It's 7:33 a.m., and the landing gear retracts with a satisfying thunk. The aircraft climbs smoothly into the clear morning sky. From a pilot's perspective, this is exactly how every takeoff should go. Clean, smooth, professional, no drama whatsoever. The passengers settle in. Some pull out books, others chat quietly with their seatmates, a few are already dozing off. It's going to be a relaxing flight to Spain. It's 7:35 a.m. and they are climbing through 5,000 feet. Birmingham departure hands them off to London control. The climb continues and the aircraft is performing beautifully, no issues whatsoever. Well, that's about to change completely. Now, 7:38 a.m. and they are passing through 10,000 feet. At this altitude, the aircraft has climbed above most of the low-level traffic. The workload decreases. In the cabin, Chief Steward John Heward makes an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now reached our cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign has been turned off. Feel free to move about the cabin. Our flight attendants will be coming through shortly with complimentary beverages. The passengers unbuckle. Some stand up to stretch, others head to the lavatories. The cabin crew begins their service routine. Time, 7:45. They're not quite at their assigned cruise altitude of 23,000 feet yet, but they're getting close. Just another 5,700 feet to go. Captain Lancaster engages the autopilot. The aircraft is flying itself now, maintaining heading and altitude automatically. This is when pilots can really relax, you know? The hard part, takeoff and initial climb, is done. Now, pay attention here. Captain Lancaster unbuckles his shoulder harness straps. Not his lap belt, mind you. He keeps that fastened, but the shoulder straps. He wants to get comfortable for the flight ahead. Perfectly normal, you know?
Now 7:47 a.m., 13 minutes into the flight, and suddenly, bang! The sound is deafening, like a bomb going off inside the cockpit. An explosive decompression that literally shakes the entire aircraft. Captain Lancaster's windscreen, the entire left windscreen panel, suddenly blows out of its frame and disappears into the sky like a bullet. In that same instant, the pressure differential between the inside of the aircraft and the thin air outside at 17,000 feet creates an instant tornado inside the cockpit. The cockpit fills with white fog, water vapor condensing instantly in the sudden decompression. You can't see anything for a few seconds. It's like being inside a cloud. The temperature plummets instantly from a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius to minus 17 outside. The wind is screaming through the cockpit at 350 miles per hour. And Captain Lancaster? He's being sucked out of that window. The explosive force yanks him upward and forward with incredible violence. His body slams against the window frame. For just a split second, most of his upper body is pushed through the opening. His head, his shoulders, his chest, but then the slipstream catches him. At 350 miles per hour, the wind is like a physical force. It pins Captain Lancaster's body against the outside of the fuselage, just above and to the side of the window opening. His arms are flailing. His face is pressed against the metal skin of the aircraft. His body is being battered by hurricane-force winds and freezing temperatures. Inside the cockpit, only part of his legs remain, and those legs, thrashing involuntarily, are jammed against the control column, pushing it forward. The autopilot disconnects immediately. The aircraft's nose drops. The plane enters a dive. First Officer Atchison is suddenly battling for control. The wind is so loud he can't hear anything, so powerful that it's literally pushing him sideways in his seat, so cold that his hands are already going numb. The first officer grabs the controls, trying to pull back, but the captain's legs are jammed against the column. He can't get full authority over the aircraft. Outside in the cabin area, the flight attendant Nigel has just felt that massive thud, that explosion. He's stunned for a second, not understanding what just happened. A bomb? An engine explosion? What the hell was that? Then he sees it. The cockpit door has been blown off its hinges by the decompression. It's lying on the floor, blocking the throttle controls. And through the open doorway, he sees the captain. Or rather, he sees his legs, still in the cockpit, still thrashing against the controls. The rest of the captain? gone, sucked out of the window.
So he doesn't think, he just reacts. Pure instinct takes over right now. Nigel lunges forward into the cockpit, stepping over the fallen door. He puts one foot in the captain's footwell, the other wedged against the side of the seat, and he grabs the captain's legs with both hands. "I've got him!" Nigel shouts, though nobody can hear him over the wind. He's holding on with everything he's got. Every ounce of strength he possesses is focused on one thing: don't let go. Because Nigel knows, somewhere in the back of his terrified mind, that if Captain Lancaster slips from his grasp, his body will be sucked into the engine intake, and if that happens, the engine will explode, and the plane will crash, and everyone will die. So he holds on. His arms are screaming in pain. The wind is tearing at him. He can't see properly through the fog. His hands are getting numb from the cold, but he does not let go. First Officer Atchison, meanwhile, has his own nightmare to deal with. He's trying to fly the aircraft, but the captain's legs are still jammed against the controls. He can't pull back fully on the yoke. The plane is still diving. Airspeed is increasing. 250 knots, 280 knots, 300 knots. They're exceeding the aircraft's maximum operating speed. The altimeter is unwinding rapidly. 16,000 feet, 15,000 feet, 14,000 feet. They're in one of the busiest air corridors in the world, the London Terminal Control Area, and they're diving through multiple layers of traffic without clearance. The first officer tries the radio. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday! Speedbird 5390! Explosive decompression! Captain is..." But his transmission is garbled. The wind noise is overwhelming. Air traffic control can hear someone calling Mayday, but they can't understand what's being said. This is getting worse by the second, and we're only 30 seconds into this nightmare. Is it possible to get worse than this? Oh yes, it will get much worse. It's 7:47 a.m., and inside the cockpit, Nigel is holding on to Captain Lancaster's legs with a death grip. The temperature is minus 17 degrees Celsius. At this altitude, there's barely enough oxygen to breathe. The captain's face is being slammed repeatedly against the exterior of the fuselage. His eyes are wide open but not blinking. His arms are flailing wildly in the wind. From inside, "I think he's dead!" Nigel screams to no one in particular. "He's not blinking! I think he's dead!" But dead or alive, Nigel knows he has to hold on.
The first officer wrestles with the controls, but Captain's legs are still jammed against the control column. Every time he tries to pull back, Lancaster's body position shifts slightly in the wind outside, and his legs push forward again. It's 7:48 a.m., and they are descending through 14,000 feet. The chief steward, John Heward, appears at the cockpit entrance. He sees Nigel stretched across the captain's seat, holding onto the captain's legs. He sees the cockpit door on the floor, wedged against the throttle controls. He sees the first officer fighting the controls with both hands. So John doesn't hesitate. He doesn't ask questions. He sees what needs to be done, and he does it. He stomps on the cockpit door, hard, once, twice. The door breaks into 3 pieces. He kicks the pieces away from the throttles. "Nigel, I've got you!" John shouts. There's a spare observer seat mounted on the aft wall of the cockpit, a jump seat with a belt. John loops his arm through that seatbelt and grabs Nigel from behind, creating a human chain. Now Nigel has an anchor point. Now he's not fighting alone. Together, John and Nigel manage to wrench Lancaster's feet away from the control column. "Feet clear!" Nigel screams. The control column moves freely now, and the first officer pulls back hard, leveling the aircraft out of its dive. But he makes a critical decision here, a decision that probably saved lives. Instead of leveling off immediately, he continues the rapid descent for a few more seconds. Why? Because he needs to get down to a lower altitude quickly, an altitude where people can breathe without supplemental oxygen. Remember, this is an older BAC 1111. It doesn't have oxygen masks for all the passengers, only for the crew. If they stay too high for too long, passengers will start passing out from hypoxia, oxygen starvation. So First Officer Atchison keeps diving. 13,000 feet, 12,000 feet, 11,000 feet.
Air traffic control is going crazy on the radio. Speedbird 5390, London Control, do you read? You are descending through controlled airspace without clearance. But the first officer still can't hear them properly. The wind noise is too loud. His headset is being buffeted by the gale. He can barely make out fragments of their transmissions. He keys his mic anyway. Mayday! Mayday! Speedbird 5390, explosive decompression, emergency descent. Now, 7:49 a.m., level at 11,000 feet. Finally, the first officer pulls the aircraft level. The dive stops. The airspeed begins to decrease. They're back in controlled flight. They've just plummeted through 6,300 feet in less than 2 minutes, and somehow, miraculously, they didn't hit another aircraft. The wind in the cockpit is still ferocious, but it's slightly less violent now because they've slowed down. The temperature is still freezing, but it's not quite as brutal as it was at 17,000 feet.
But now there's a new problem, my friend. With the aircraft level and the speed reduced, the captain's body is no longer pinned flat against the fuselage by the wind. Instead, his body slides around to the side of the aircraft. His arms are still flailing, his face is still being smashed against the metal skin, but now he's dangling more precariously, and the risk of him being torn away and sucked into the engine is even greater. Both Nigel and John know they can't hold on forever. Their arms are going numb, their muscles are failing. Now 7:50 a.m., and Simon Rogers, another steward, appears from the cabin. He's been working his way forward from the back of the aircraft, trying to help wherever he can. When he sees what's happening in the cockpit, his eyes go wide with fear. But like Nigel and John before him, he doesn't freeze, he acts. "I'll take over," Simon shouts, but Nigel shakes his head. He's terrified, but he's not letting go. Not yet, not until he knows someone else has a secure grip. John makes the call. "Simon, sit in the jump seat and buckle in." Simon throws himself into the observer seat and fastens the belt. Now he can brace himself and use both hands to hold Lancaster's legs. "Okay, Nigel," John shouts. "Let him go. We've got him." Then John helps Nigel out of the cockpit. Nigel collapses into a seat in the cabin. Inside the cockpit, Simon is now holding Captain Lancaster's ankles. Working together with John's help, they manage to hook the captain's feet over the back of his seat. They're not just holding dead weight anymore, they've got leverage. But the question remains, is Captain Lancaster even still alive? Simon stares at those flailing arms visible through the broken window frame. The captain's eyes are still wide open, staring, not blinking. His face is slamming against the fuselage over and over. "He's gone," Simon says. "He must be dead by now." But they keep holding on anyway, because if they let go, the body could damage the aircraft, it could hit the wing, it could go into the engine, it could bring down the entire plane. So they hold on. 7:51 a.m., and the first officer is finally able to properly communicate with air traffic control. The wind is still roaring through the cockpit, but with the aircraft at a lower altitude and slower speed, he can at least hear the radio now. "Speedbird 5390, London Control, say your intentions." He keys his mic, his voice strained and urgent. "London, Speedbird 5390, we've had an explosive decompression. The captain's windscreen has blown out. The captain is outside the aircraft. We need immediate radar assistance to the nearest airport."
There's a pause on the radio, a long pause. The controller clearly can't believe what he just heard. "Speedbird 5390, confirm. Did you say the captain is outside the aircraft?" "Affirmative. He's halfway out the window. We're holding on to him. We need to get on the ground now." "Speedbird 5390, roger, understand. The nearest suitable airport is Southampton. Are you able to accept Southampton?" The first officer has never flown into Southampton before. He's familiar with Gatwick. He's landed there dozens of times. But Southampton is closer, much closer, and time is critical. "Negative, I'm not familiar with Southampton. Request Gatwick," he says. "Speedbird 5390, Southampton is significantly closer. Gatwick will add at least 10 more minutes to your flight time." The first officer thinks for a moment. 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes with the captain hanging outside in freezing temperatures. 10 more minutes of the crew holding on to his legs. 10 more minutes of flying a crippled aircraft with a gaping hole in the cockpit. He makes his decision. Roger, I'll take Southampton. I need radar vectors and I need you to talk me down. I've never been there before. Speedbird 5390, understood. Turn left, heading 180. Descend to 5,000 feet. I'll have you on the ground in 15 minutes, the controller says. First Officer Atchison banks the aircraft to the south, pointing towards Southampton. His hands are freezing, his face is numb, he can barely feel the controls, but he's flying. He's in command, and he's going to get this aircraft on the ground. Now, 7:55 a.m., the first officer is now being vectored towards Southampton by air traffic control. The traffic controller makes a decision. He's going to clear the airspace. Every other aircraft in the area is being diverted, held, or rerouted. The runway is yours whenever you're ready, he says to the first officer. But there's another problem. The aircraft is heavy. They've only been in the air for about 13 minutes, so they still have too much fuel. It means the first officer is going to have to land this aircraft well above its maximum landing weight. And Southampton's runway, it's only 1,800 meters long, significantly shorter than he'd like for an overweight landing. Southampton, Speedbird 5390, can you confirm runway length? He asks. Speedbird 5390, runway 02 is 1,723 meters in length. It is acceptable for a BAC 111, but I should advise you that Bournemouth has a longer runway if you prefer, the controller says. Negative, we don't have time. We'll take Southampton, but make it a gentle approach. I need all the help I can get, says the first officer. Roger, Speedbird 5390, you are 9 miles from touchdown, says the controller. But is he going to land the plane successfully and save all the passengers? Will this nightmare be over soon?
Speedbird 5390, you are 3 miles from touchdown, the controller says. In the cabin, Sue Prince and the other flight attendants have prepared the passengers for an emergency landing. Everyone is in the brace position. Some are praying. Others are silent, gripping armrests with white knuckles. One passenger later described the atmosphere. It was eerily quiet. No one was screaming anymore. We'd all just accepted it. Whatever was going to happen would happen. We were in God's hands. 8:01 a.m. The first officer extends the landing gear. Speedbird 5390, 2 miles. You are slightly left of centerline. Correct right, 5 degrees, the controller says. Correcting right, the first officer responds. Simon Rogers and John Heward are still holding Captain Lancaster's legs. Their arms are completely numb now. They can barely feel their hands, but they don't let go. The captain has been outside the aircraft for over 13 minutes. The cold, the lack of oxygen, the physical battering, no one could survive that. Could he? 8:02 a.m. Speedbird 5390, 1 mile. You are on glide path, on centerline. You're cleared to land, says the controller. The first officer doesn't respond. He's too focused on the approach. His eyes flick between the runway ahead and his instruments. Airspeed, altitude, rate of descent. Everything has to be perfect. The runway is visible now through the windscreen opening and through the gap where the captain's windscreen used to be. It looks short, very short. Half a mile. Looking good. You've got this. 8:02 a.m. and 40 seconds, and finally, the BAC 111 crosses the runway threshold at exactly the right altitude and airspeed. First Officer Atchison begins his flare, pulling back gently on the yoke to reduce the rate of descent. The main wheels kiss the runway with barely a squeak. It's a perfect landing. The first officer immediately deploys the thrust reversers and stands on the brakes. The aircraft decelerates rapidly. In the cabin, passengers gasp with relief. Some burst into tears. Others applaud. The aircraft rolls to a stop about 2/3 of the way down the runway. Plenty of room to spare.
The moment the aircraft stops, emergency vehicles surround it. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. Firefighters rush up the stairs and into the cockpit. They grab Captain Lancaster's body. They lay him gently on the cockpit floor. His face is blue. His skin is covered in frost. He's not breathing. He's gone, one of the firefighters says quietly. But then, incredibly, one of the paramedics detects a faint pulse. Wait, he's alive! Get the oxygen, now! Captain Tim Lancaster is rushed into the hospital. The questions right now are, will the captain survive this bizarre incident?
And how does a windscreen just blow out of a commercial airliner at 17,000 feet? Yes, I have the answers. Stick with me. So, before letting you know what happened with the captain, let me tell you about the investigation. The Air Accidents Investigation Branch sent a senior investigator to examine the aircraft. His findings were shocking. The windscreen frame showed no distortion, no structural damage, no metal fatigue, so this wasn't an airframe problem. There were also no glass shards, ruling out a bird strike. So they checked the maintenance logs, and there it was. Just 24 hours earlier, that windscreen had been replaced during routine maintenance at Birmingham. The investigator went straight to the maintenance hangar to interview the engineer who did the work. The guy was an experienced professional who genuinely believed he'd done everything correctly. But he made a series of small mistakes that cascaded into catastrophe. Here's what happened. The night before the flight, around 4 a.m., the engineer started removing the old windscreen. He noticed the old bolts were actually incorrect, slightly too short. But those wrong bolts had held fine for 4 years, so he made his first mistake. Instead of checking the parts manual for the correct specifications, he decided to visually match the old bolts and install new ones of the same size. Time pressure, you know? He figured if it worked before, matching them should be safe. So he picked bolts that looked identical to his samples, but they weren't. The correct bolts were 8 millimeters in diameter. The ones he picked, 7 millimeters. Just 1 millimeter difference, impossible to see with the naked eye in poor lighting. He installed the bolts while stretched awkwardly over the fuselage. The aircraft was pushed against the hangar door, making access terrible. He couldn't properly see what he was doing. He was working mostly by feel. The 7 millimeter bolts threaded into the 8 millimeter holes, but they didn't grip correctly. There was play in the connection, but the engineer couldn't tell because of his awkward position. He finished at 6 a.m., signed off the work, and went home. Job done. Aircraft ready for service. He had no idea he'd just created a catastrophe waiting to happen. The investigation also found out that the engineer was under time pressure, working an overnight shift when performance is naturally degraded, in poor lighting, with difficult aircraft access. He relied on experience rather than procedures. He made assumptions based on past success. None of these factors alone would cause an accident, but combined, my friend, perfect storm. The maintenance culture encouraged shortcuts. Get it done quickly, we've got a schedule. Engineers had developed workarounds and tricks to expedite tasks, and most of the time these worked fine, until they didn't, right? So, what changed after British Airways Flight 5390? Let's talk about it, right? So, first, maintenance procedures. British Airways immediately overhauled its entire maintenance protocol. No more shortcuts, no more visual matching of parts. Every component installation now required consulting the official parts manual and using the correct part numbers. They implemented a mandatory double-check system. After any critical maintenance task, especially anything involving flight control surfaces, engines, or windscreens, a second engineer had to independently verify the work before the aircraft could be released for service. Think about it. If a second engineer had inspected that windscreen installation, he would have caught the error immediately. Those 7D bolts would have been replaced with the correct 8D bolts, and none of this would have happened. Second, working conditions. The investigation revealed that maintenance engineers were often working under poor conditions: inadequate lighting, difficult access to aircraft, time pressure, overnight shifts when human performance is degraded. British Airways invested in better lighting systems in their hangars. They improved access to aircraft during maintenance. They reduced time pressure by allowing longer maintenance windows. Speed was no longer the priority. Accuracy was. Take the time to do it right became the new mantra. Third, human factors training. Before Flight 5390, human factors training in aviation was almost entirely focused on pilots. We learned about situational awareness, decision-making under pressure, crew resource management, all that good stuff. But maintenance engineers, they got technical training. They learned how to install parts, how to read schematics, how to troubleshoot systems, but they didn't learn about human factors, about how time pressure affects decision-making, how confirmation bias makes us see what we expect to see, how fatigue degrades performance.
After this incident, human factors training became mandatory for maintenance personnel across the industry, not just at British Airways, worldwide. Engineers learn to recognize when they're vulnerable to making mistakes. They learn to speak up when something doesn't feel right. They learned that following procedures isn't just bureaucratic busywork, it's a safety net that catches errors before they become catastrophes. Fourth, windscreen inspections. Immediately after the incident, every BAC 111 in the British Airways fleet was grounded and inspected. And guess what they found? At least 2 other aircraft had windscreens installed with incorrect bolts. Yep, flying passengers around with the same ticking time bomb that nearly killed everyone on Flight 5390. So those windscreens were immediately replaced with correct bolts. Crisis averted. Since 1990, there hasn't been another incident like Flight 5390 involving incorrect windscreen installation. The lessons learned from that terrifying day over England have prevented other families from losing loved ones, and that's the silver lining in this story. Yes, it was traumatic. Yes, people were hurt, but nobody died, and the industry learned from it. Okay, Captain Mercer, but how about Captain Lancaster? Did he survive or not? The answer: yes, he did. Isn't it unbelievable? Captain Tim Lancaster made a remarkable recovery. Within just 5 months, he was back in the cockpit flying again. When reporters asked him why he returned to flying so quickly, he said, "The day I decided I was going to go back to work and fly again, everything else became easy. Flying is what I do. It's who I am." The crew of Flight 5390 received numerous awards for their actions that day. The first officer, Atchison, received the Queen's Commendation for Valuable Service in the Air, one of the highest honors a British aviator can receive. Nigel Ogden, John Heward, Simon Rogers, and Sue Prince all received commendations for their bravery. When they returned to Birmingham Airport after the incident, the entire airport staff, ground crew, check-in agents, baggage handlers, everyone stopped what they were doing and gave them a standing ovation as they walked through the terminal. That meant more than any medal, do you agree? Now, if you found this story as incredible as I do, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more fascinating aviation stories, and drop a comment below. I want to know what you think about this incredible incident. This is Captain Jack Mercer, signing off. See you on the next flight.